When Marina reached down cautiously, he sniffed her fingers and then pressed his head into her palm with surprising tenderness. "You shouldn't be out here alone," Marina said softly. Eliza looked toward the row of modest beach houses a block inland. One porch light was on, flickering slightly. "I'm not alone," she replied. There was no arrogance in it, just truth. Marina offered to walk her home. Eliza didn't argue. They moved together down the sidewalk, Buddy trotting ahead, then behind, then ahead again, scanning, checking guard. The house was small, white paint chipped near the steps. A faded American flag hung from the porch, edges frayed by salt air. There was something disciplined about the yard despite its modesty. Trimmed edges, straight lines, care taken where it could be. Eliza paused before unlocking the door. "You can come in if you want," she said quietly. "A dad says we always help people, especially when they're scared." The words caught Marina off guard. Inside, the house smelled faintly of coffee and laundry detergent. Photographs lined the hallway. A man in uniform standing tall beside a naval ship, Eliza on his shoulders. Buddy as a younger dog, awkward and oversized. Marina studied the picture of the man more closely. The uniform was crisp, the medals precise. "He's important," Marina murmured without meaning to. Eliza nodded. "He's an admiral." The word settled heavily in the room. Marina blinked. "An admiral? In the Navy?" Eliza clarified simply. "He's gone a lot." Marina felt a ripple of disbelief. The quiet house, the chipped paint, the little girl wandering a boardwalk alone at night. It didn't match the image the title carried. "Why were you out there?" Marina asked gently. Eliza looked down at Buddy. "Sometimes when I can't sleep, I walk by the water. Dad says the ocean keeps secrets, but it also listens." Marina felt that sentence settle somewhere deep inside her. "You were brave tonight," she said after a moment. Eliza's lips pressed together. "I was scared." "A brave isn't the absence of fear," Marina replied softly. "It's what you do while you're scared." Eliza looked up at her then, really looked at her, and something unspoken passed between them. Recognition, maybe. Two people learning how to live with absence. A car engine hummed faintly in the distance. Headlights passed by the window. Marina realized how late it had become. "I should go," she said gently. Eliza walked her back to the door. Buddy followed, leaning lightly against Marina's leg before she stepped out onto the porch. "Will you be okay?" Eliza asked. Marina glanced down the quiet street, then back at the girl standing under the soft porch light. "Yes," she said, and for the first time in a long while she meant it. As she walked home, the night no longer felt like it was closing in. It felt like it had witnessed something. And somewhere out at sea, a Navy Admiral had no idea that by morning, the life of a stranger, and his own, would begin to quietly shift. Marina barely slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the boardwalk again. The stretch of empty wood, the men's shadows stretching long and confident, the sudden flash of gold for breaking the dark. But woven into that fear was something else now. A child's voice, steady despite its tremble. "Help her, Buddy." The words replayed like a pulse. When dawn finally pushed pale light through her thin curtains, Marina was already awake, sitting at the edge of her bed with a mug of coffee gone cold in her hands. The world looked softer in morning light, less threatening, as if the night's cruelty had been imagined. Then came the knock. It was firm, measured, not impatient. Her stomach tightened instantly. No one knocked on her door at 7 in the morning. She crossed the small apartment quietly, bare feet against cool tile, and hesitated before opening it. The hallway outside smelled faintly of cleaning chemicals and stale air. When she pulled the door open, she had to tilt her head slightly upward. The man standing there wore his uniform like it was part of his spine. Dark navy fabric. Medals catching the morning light. Cap tucked neatly beneath one arm. His posture was rigid but not cold. His eyes, however, were searching. Not aggressive, but deeply alert. "Miss Marina Hale?" he asked. His voice was calm, controlled. "Yes," she replied, suddenly aware of her loose sweater and unbrushed hair. He gave a small nod. "I'm Admiral Thomas Bennett." The name clicked a second too late. Eliza's father. Marina's throat tightened. "Is she okay?" The Admiral's expression shifted almost imperceptibly, a flicker of something human beneath the discipline. "She's fine," he said. "Because of you." Marina shook her head immediately. "No, because of Buddy. And because my daughter was brave enough to step forward," he replied quietly. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The hallway seemed too small to hold the weight of the conversation that was about to unfold. May I come in?" he asked. She stepped aside. The Admiral moved into her apartment with the contained energy of someone used to command rooms much larger than this one. Yet he looked around not with judgment, but with observation. The single lamp, the small kitchen table, the unopened mail stacked neatly by the door. "I spoke to the officers this morning," he began. "They informed me of what happened." Marina folded her arms loosely, unsure where to place her hands. "Your daughter saved me." The Admiral inhaled slowly. "She told me the same. He also told me you walked her home." A pause. "She shouldn't have been out alone," he added, more to himself than to Marina. There it was, the crack. Not anger, not accusation. Guilt. "She said you're often at sea," Marina offered carefully. His jaw tightened slightly. "My work requires it, and she misses you." The words slipped out before Marina could stop them. The Admiral didn't react immediately, but something shifted in his eyes, something heavy and unguarded. "She doesn't complain," he said quietly. "She doesn't need to." Silence stretched between them, not uncomfortable but honest. Marina found herself studying him more closely now. The metals, the crisp lines, the weight of leadership stitched into every seam. Yet beneath it she could see exhaustion. The kind that doesn't come from lack of sleep, but from divided loyalty. "She walks by the ocean when she can't sleep," Marina said gently. "She said it listens." For the first time the Admiral's composure faltered, just slightly. His gaze drifted toward the small window where morning light filtered in. "She used to wait on the pier when I came back from deployments," he murmured. "Even when she was little. I told her the ocean connects us, that no matter how far I sail, we stand on the same water." Marina felt her chest tighten. "She believes you," she said. The Admiral nodded once, slow. "I came here this morning to thank you," he said, straightening slightly, "and to apologize." For what? For not being there." The admission hung in the air like something fragile. Marina swallowed. "She was there," she said softly. "And she was enough." A faint sound interrupted them. A car door outside, then the distant bark of a familiar dog. Both of them turned toward the window instinctively. "Buddy," the Admiral allowed himself the smallest smile. "She insisted on coming," he said. "He said she needed to make sure you were safe in daylight, too." Marina felt something warm bloom inside her, unexpected and steady. For the first time in years, someone had knocked on her door not to take something, not to demand something, but to connect. Outside, Buddy barked again. Once, bright and alive, the Admiral moved toward the door. "Would you care to join us for breakfast?" he asked, his voice no longer strictly formal. "Eliza would like that." Marina hesitated only a second before nodding. As they stepped into the morning light together, the world felt subtly rearranged. The night had tested them. Morning was offering something new. Chapter 4. The weight of staying breakfast at the Bennett house felt strangely intimate for people who had met only hours ago. The kitchen was small but orderly, sunlight spilling across the table in pale gold rectangles. Eliza sat cross-legged on her chair, hair still untamed from sleep, watching Marina as though she were making sure she hadn't vanished overnight. Buddy lay beneath the table, his body angled toward the doorway, ears occasionally twitching at distant sounds, protective even in rest. Admiral Bennett moved around the kitchen with quiet efficiency, pouring coffee, setting plates down with careful precision. And out of uniform, he seemed both younger and more vulnerable. Navy sweater replacing medals, sleeves pushed slightly up his forearms. "I don't usually cook," he admitted, sliding a plate toward Marina. "But I'm trying." Eliza grinned. "He burns toast less now." The Admiral gave her a look of mock offense, and for a moment the house felt lighter. But beneath the warmth, something unspoken lingered. Marina noticed it when Eliza's laughter faded too quickly, when the Admiral checked his phone more than once, when the air seemed to tighten around the edges of comfort. "You're leaving again," Marina said gently, not as a question. The Admiral didn't deny it. "Tomorrow," he replied. "A deployment briefing tonight." Eliza's fork paused mid-air, though she didn't look up. Buddy shifted under the table. Marina felt the familiar ache of impending absence settle over the room. She recognized it intimately, the countdown of hours, the rehearsed strength of brave faces worn too early. "How long?" she asked quietly. 3 months, he said. 3 months in a child's life is enormous." Eliza finally looked up. "Buddy and I will be fine," she said quickly, as if trying to seal the subject before it cracked open. The Admiral reached across the table and squeezed her hand. I know you will. But knowing wasn't the same as being there. Marina cleared her throat softly. And does she have anyone nearby? Family? The Admiral shook his head. Her mother relocated overseas last year. My sister lives 2 states away. We manage. Manage. The word felt too thin. Eliza's eyes flicked toward Marina. You could visit, she said suddenly. The Admiral glanced at his daughter, surprised. Just sometimes, Eliza added quickly. If she wants. The invitation hung fragile in the air. Marina felt her instinct to retreat, to avoid entanglement, to protect her carefully rebuilt solitude. But she also felt something else. The memory of a growl in the dark. A child who stepped forward. A dog who didn't hesitate. I'd like that, Marina said softly. The relief on Eliza's face was immediate and radiant. The Admiral exhaled slowly, gratitude evident though restrained. That afternoon they walked together along the same boardwalk where everything had shifted. In daylight, it seemed almost harmless. Children riding bikes, elderly couples feeding gulls, fishermen leaning over railings. But Marina still felt the echo of that night in the wood beneath her feet. Eliza ran ahead with Buddy, laughter carried easily on the wind. The Admiral walked beside Marina, hands clasped behind his back, posture thoughtful rather than rigid now. She doesn't talk much about missing me, he said after a while. She doesn't want to make it harder, Marina replied. He nodded, cursed it. I've always believed service required sacrifice. It does, Marina said gently. But children aren't soldiers. He absorbed that quietly. They stopped near the spot where the confrontation had happened. There was no visible trace of it now, no broken wood, no lingering shadows. Just sunlight and open air. I've commanded fleets, the Admiral said softly. I navigated storms, made decisions that affected thousands of lives. He looked toward Eliza, but I almost missed the most important one. Marina followed his gaze. You didn't, she said. You're here. For now is what she has. The wind lifted lightly, tangling Marina's hair. She didn't smooth it down this time. That evening, as the sky bled orange into violet, they stood together watching the horizon. Eliza held her father's hand tightly, as if memorizing its shape. When darkness finally crept in again, it didn't feel as threatening, because this time they weren't alone in it. And sometimes staying, even briefly, can change the course of leaving forever. Chapter 5. When the ocean brings them home, the morning of departure arrived too quietly. There was no storm, no dramatic sky, no crashing omen to match the weight in Eliza's chest. The sun rose pale and indifferent, light spilling across the harbor in gentle silver ripples. The naval ship waited in the distance like something enormous and patient, its steel hull cutting a dark shape against the water. Marina stood a few steps back on the pier, giving space where it was needed, but close enough to be felt. Buddy sat at her side, unusually still, as if he understood that today required discipline. Admiral Bennett knelt in front of his daughter, his hands resting on her small shoulders. Up close, Marina could see the careful control in his expression, the way he held himself together not for command now, but for fatherhood. I'll call whenever I can, he said softly. I know, Eliza replied, chin lifted, brave in the way children become when they think strength is what adults need most. You take care of Buddy. He takes care of me. A faint smile ghosted across the Admiral's face. He glanced up at Marina then. The look was no longer formal, no longer guarded. It carried trust. Thank you, he said simply. She shook her head gently. She saved me first. He stood adjusting his cap. For a brief second, the uniform seemed heavier than before. Not because of rank, but because of distance. The ship's horn sounded low and resonant, vibrating through the dock. It was time. Eliza stepped forward suddenly and wrapped her arms around him, burying her face into the navy fabric of his jacket. He held her tightly, longer than protocol would allow if anyone had been watching closely. When he finally pulled back, he pressed a kiss to her forehead. Then he turned. Marina watched him walk up the gangway without looking back again. Not because he didn't want to, but because turning twice makes leaving harder. The ship began to move slowly, slicing through the harbor water with quiet power. Eliza stood at the edge of the dock, hand raised high. Buddy pressed against her leg. They stayed until the vessel was nothing more than a dark line against light. Only then did Eliza lower her arm. The first week passed gently. Marina visited every evening after work, Sometimes they cooked together disably. Sometimes they walked the boardwalk at dusk, Buddy trotting ahead like a self-appointed guardian of both their hearts. Eliza talked more than she had before. About the ocean. About how her father once let her hold the ship's wheel when she was 5, even though she was too small to see over it. He said leadership isn't about size, she told Marina one evening, staring out at the waves. It's about standing steady. Marina thought about that long after she returned to her apartment. Standing steady. She had spent so long shrinking, avoiding, surviving. But something about that night, about a child refusing to let fear decide the ending, had begun to unearth parts of her she thought were gone. 2 weeks into the deployment, a storm rolled in unexpectedly. Not violent, but heavy. Rain came sideways, wind rattling windows and bending the palm trees near the shore. Marina's phone rang just after midnight. It was Eliza. "I can't sleep," she whispered. Marina didn't hesitate. She drove through rain-slick streets to the small white house. Buddy greeted her at the door, tail wagging but body alert. Eliza sat on the couch, knees pulled to her chest. "The ocean sounds angry," she said. Marina sat beside her. "Oh, the ocean isn't angry," she replied gently. "It's just loud when it misses someone." Eliza leaned into her side without asking permission. They stayed there together, listening to the storm, not fighting it, not fearing it, just existing inside it. By the time the rain softened to a whisper, Eliza had fallen asleep against her shoulder. Marina carried her carefully to bed, brushing salt-damp hair from her forehead the same way she imagined a mother would. Months passed in measured calls and calendar marks. Marina became part of the house in quiet ways, a second mug on the drying rack, an extra pair of shoes by the door, laughter echoing through rooms that once held only waiting. And then, one clear afternoon, the call came. The ship was returning early. No emergency, no crisis, just mission complete ahead of schedule. Eliza didn't scream this time. She stood very still, absorbing the news like sunlight. The harbor was brighter when the ship returned. Crowds lined the dock, flags waving, families pressing forward with hope written openly across their faces. Marina stood beside Eliza again, Buddy sitting proudly between them. When Admiral Bennett stepped onto the dock, he scanned the crowd only briefly before his eyes found her, his daughter. And then, just beside her, Marina. Recognition softened his entire posture. Eliza ran first. He caught her easily, lifting her clear off the ground. When he set her down, his gaze lifted to Marina. No words were needed at first. The ocean behind them shimmered under afternoon light, restless but welcoming. "Seems you stood steady," he said quietly to Marina. She smiled, feeling the fullness of everything that had shifted since that night. "I had good teachers," she replied, glancing down at Eliza and Buddy. The Admiral extended his hand, but instead of a formal shake, Marina stepped forward and embraced him briefly, not out of obligation, but gratitude. Quite easy. Around them, families reunited, laughter and tears blending into something sacred. The ocean kept moving as it always would. Ships would leave again. Storms would come and pass. Distance would test them, but they had learned something vital. Courage doesn't always roar. Sometimes it's a child's voice trembling in the dark. Sometimes it's a dog refusing to step aside. Sometimes it's choosing to stay when leaving feels easier. As the sun lowered over the water, painting everything in warm gold, Marina realized she was no longer shrinking. She was standing steady, and this time the night, when it came, would find her surrounded.